From the 809 Restaurant and Lounge in the heart of Inwood, New York City, welcome to Inwood Artworks On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home here in what we affectionately call Upstate Manhattan. I'm Aaron Sims.
And I'm Jonathan Bell.
And this is Live and Local. It's our podcast dedicated to showcasing the musicians of Upper Manhattan. We talk about what they do, and best of all, listen to them perform live in one of our favorite local uptown venues. Who is joining us today, Jonathan?
Aaron, today we welcome lifelong Manhattanite John Albin. John is a blues and jazz guitarist, composer, and vocalist who has been playing in and around New York since the early 1980s. John has appeared at many of the city's blues, jazz, and rock venues and can most often be heard in a jazz guitar duet with Mike Melkonian. The two have been regulars, pandemic permitting, at Kismat Indian Restaurant in Washington Heights and Bettola Italian Restaurant on the Upper West Side. John also performs with his jazz-influenced original blues band Blue Food, most recently at the Washington Heights Jazz Festival, and is a stalwart of the burgeoning Upper Manhattan jazz jam scene. We are pleased to have him today on Live and Local.
Without further ado, let's listen to John Albin.
Alberta, child, let your hair hang down so low. Alberta, baby, child, let your hair hang down so low. You know I'd give you more gold than your apron would hold if you just let your hair hang down so low. Alberta, child, what's on your mind? Alberta, baby, child, what is on your mind? You know you make me so sad, 'cause you treat me so bad. Won't you please, oh, tell me what's on your mind? Alberta, why do you treat me so unkind? Alberta, baby, why do you treat me so unkind? You got me worried, and you always got me blue. Won't you please, oh, tell me, why do you treat me so unkind? Alberta Child, let your hair hang down so low. Alberta, baby. Child, let your hair hang down so low. You know I'd give you more gold than your apron would hold if you just let your hair hang down so low. If I fall through the cracks, would you help me find my way? If I fall through the cracks, would you help me find my way? If I held out my hand, would you take it or turn away? If I lose my home, would you leave me on the street? If I lose my home, would you leave me on the street? Would you just walk away if I begged you for something to eat? If I lose my mind, would you turn away from me? If I lose my mind, would you turn away from me? Would you just look away? If I fall through the cracks, would you help me find my way? If I fall through the cracks, would you help me find my way? If I hold out my hand, would would you take it or walk away?
John, thank you so much for being here today. That was some smooth playing. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You bet. It's great to have you here. First, would you mind telling us what you just played for us?
The first song I played is called Alberta, and it was written by folk singer Bob Gibson, who was one of the early sort of folk revival figures in the 50s and early 60s, and he was kind of a mentor figure to Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and that generation of folk artists. And the song has particular meaning for me because I grew up in the Village, and I was born in 1962, so right in the thick of all that. And that song was also done by a band called the Blues Project, which was one of the precursors to Blood, Sweat, and Tears. It included Al Cooper and Steve Katz, who went on to found Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And in my high school rock and roll days, it was one of my favorite albums, and I often played that song with garage bands and played it on rooftops and garages around the metropolitan area, as it were. I'd kind of forgotten about that song, and all of a sudden, I don't know, a couple of months ago, it kind of popped back in my head, and I didn't even realize that it had been written by Bob Gibson, who also has special significance for me because he was one of the neighbors in my building when I was growing up.
Wow.
And his daughters actually babysat for me as a little kid. And I had been listening to a fair amount of Bob Gibson recently, just kind of going through my dim childhood memories of that folk era and the way that kind of folk musicians were traipsing in and out of my parents' life and in our apartment and stuff like that. And the song came back to me, and I thought about, well, how could I do this a little differently? The original version of it has sort of a House of the Rising Sun kind of feel. It's like a real, it's a folk song. It's, even though it was written in modern times, it was meant to evoke, a song from the early 20th century. But I decided to rethink it a little bit and add some jazz harmony to it and bring it into my own kind of feel. And that's sort of, I'm trying to put this a little less vaguely, but that's kind of the challenge I find, in that my music goes in a lot of different directions. I can play sort of, gut bucket Chicago blues. I can play bebop influenced straight ahead jazz. I can play, garage band, jam band rock and roll. I can play sort of whatever anybody asks me to, as needed. And all of those influences seem kind of disparate, but a song like that, I found a way to pull them all together in one place, and it has particular appeal to me. So like when I've been doing my duet sets or some of my live solo jazz sets for Kismat Indian Restaurant and Jazz Wahai, I've brought that into my repertoire, and it has a lot of meaning for me.
John, one thing that leaps out immediately is the very natural, very convincing, very persuasive feeling vocally that you have for the blues. Would you mind taking us back a little bit to your coming of age and how you got? I'm of course interested in the guitar, but for this moment I'm kind of interested right now in your vocal. First of all, you have a very kind of the type of resonant voice which I think matches idiomatically quite well with the music. It's a great fit, and I'm just wondering how that came about, your attraction to the blues.
Well, that's a good question. I guess it goes back to my roots as a kid, and my father in particular was a big influence on. Obviously, everybody's father's a big influence on how they develop. But my father was he was a college professor and an economist, and he was mainly a classical music maven. I mean, he had a phenomenal grasp of classical music, even though he wasn't a musician. But he was interested in a little bit of everything. So there were all these records in my dad's record collection, like the Blues Project record that I talked about. And there was also a Muddy Waters record called Fathers and Sons, which features Muddy Waters, and a guitar player named Mike Bloomfield, who was kind of a legend of white Jew blues, which is what I am. And it also featured Paul Butterfield and Muddy Waters rhythm section. And as a little kid, I just heard this voice, this Muddy Waters voice, just coming out of me, and I was like, what is that? Because I don't know if you've ever heard Muddy Waters very much, but it's absolutely an incredible sound.
My father also had a Muddy Waters in his record collection, so
Yeah,
I understand.
and
Bo Diddley and all those guys.
It was a sound that just really stuck with me. Now, my early musical training was actually, I took classical guitar lessons for a couple of years as a kid, and then I kind of put the guitar down, and I didn't really think about it until I was in high school. And somewhere along the way, somebody had showed me a 12-bar blues progression. So in high school, I started meeting all of these people, kids my age, like a million kids who were into playing blues harmonica, and they all needed me to accompany them. So I just sat there accompanying them on blues guitar. And then somewhere in the middle of it, my dad looked in the back pages of the Village Voice, which in those days had classified ads in it, and he saw that the lead guitar player from the Blues Project, Danny Kalb, was offering guitar lessons. So I went and I traipsed over to his scary apartment on West 16th Street, which Chelsea was a scary neighborhood in 1976 and 78 and whatever it was. And I took some guitar lessons from Danny Kalb, who showed me, I'm getting to the singing part, don't worry. He taught me a bunch of tunes and a bunch of the classic blues licks and sort of straightened out some things in my playing. But then he told me, you have to sing. And he made me sing songs. Like he taught me like some Jimmy Reed songs, like Big Boss Man and Caress Me Baby. And he taught me Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. And he taught me Alberta. And he impressed on me how important it was to sing. Because I don't feel like I'm a particularly natural singer. And certainly early on, I was always kind of shy about it. But what I found is that in order to feel the music, even if you're playing instrumental music, like you're playing a jazz standard or something like that, you have to understand the vocal versions of it. You have to feel the lyrics. You have to feel the song in order to play it. And so with time, I became a more comfortable vocalist. And as I started playing in bands in college especially, nobody would sing. So it'd be like, okay, I'll sing. And that's kind of how it happened. And I just stuck with it. And I've never studied vocal technique or anything like that. And I've never particularly cultivated my own voice. But it's always been about how do I feel the song and what's coming through me. And hopefully it works.
And you just played an original blues song for us.
Yes. That song is called If I Fall Through the Cracks. And it was inspired about a year ago. I had been in lockdown like everybody else, hiding from what it is we're hiding from right now. And I think I had a doctor's appointment, or I had some reason to be in Midtown, and I hadn't been in Midtown in months. And I also had to go down to the Village, I think, to see my mother for something. But anyways, I was walking around a bunch of different Manhattan neighborhoods, and it just struck me just how many homeless people there are, and how the circumstances we're facing now are having such a profound effect on people. And you just see people, and what do you do? And I thought of this as, the homeless people calling out and saying, what are you going to do about this? And I don't know what to do about it, because I can't change the world. But whenever I see people in distress on the street, I try to treat them like a person. I give them money. I don't shoo them away. And try to vote for people who are going to do a good job, and just keep thinking about it and talking about it with people, so that we don't lose sight of the kind of distress that people are in.
This is just jumped in my head now, not planning on it. Is there any connection for you between the blues as a communication genre and observations of the world? I don't know why I'm asking this exactly, except it seems like a home base for you as a musician. And is it a type of making music that's able to incorporate your just observations as a human of the world as you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I've thought about it in exactly those terms, but I think yes, it is a way to make observations about the world you see. I mean, there's this whole kind of cliche of the blues is the devil's music, and gospel is God's music, and I don't think that's quite right. I mean, I think if you listen to blues, what it really is the music of observation of ordinary life, of the quotidian in the world of black people in the South and in the diaspora to the North. And Chicago blues is full of that. There's a question and answer nature of blues songwriting where there's not a lot of lyrics in the blues song. It's you state a question. If I lose my mind, would you turn away from me? Or if I fall through the cracks, will you help me find my way? Or I got stones in my pathway and my road is dark at night. And it's, first of all, it's indirect. It's usually not, that's maybe an exaggeration, but it's often indirect. Like in a blues song, you often hear someone implying something about social commentary or about relationships or about even references to the world of slavery. Like taking Muddy Waters as an example, a song like Mannish Boy. I mean, that's a declaration that I'm a man despite the oppressive world trying to tell me that I'm not a man. And it's got references to, I've got the John the Conqueror, which is a reference to hoodoo and African religion and magic that was preserved in the slave traditions in the South. And blues is full of that. Now, you can look at that as, oh, well, that's black music, and therefore it's cultural appropriation or something to sing it. But it's really not. I find it universal. I find it that all of our cultural groups have some sort of struggle in them. I mean, as I said, my background is Jewish, and there's a great, though I'm not religious, but I have a strong sense of ethnic identity and of the history of struggle and oppression that Jewish people have faced. Mm-hmm. And that is, to me, a big connection to blues. And the music speaks to me. The music describes the world that I see around me, and it means a lot to me.
Do you find a way to, I think just to kind of tie it all up in a bow, it's like an expression of pain, of personal pain.
Well,
whether it's broad, being a political way, or it's something as atrocious as slavery, blues is rooted in a lot of personal pain.
It's often pain, but it's also the sensual. It's the sort of the daily experience. There's a lot of humor in blues. You get songs like there's a song called Kidney Stew, and there's a line in it like I'm crazy about you, baby, but I just ain't got the price.
Right. There's a lot of irony.
You're a high-class mama, but I guess there ain't no dice. I'm going back home, going to get my old gal Sue. Going back home, going to get my old gal Sue. She ain't no caviar kind of mama. She's just plain old kidney stew. And that's just, I love the wordplay. I love the humor, as well as the emotional, the sort of the painful elements, and the way it describes sometimes the dark side of people.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about the local scene for what it is, specifically Inwood, Washington Heights, and what you've seen in this neighborhood, and where you think it's going, and what the possibilities may be, and what hopes you may have for the area in terms of local performance opportunities, of course, once things open up and so forth, because I know you're involved that way.
Well, first of all, I think I need to do a shout out to my friends Mark Cross and Louise Rogers. They've created an organization called Jazz Wahai, which they're both music teachers by vocation, and so this branched out of what they do. But they started a jam session It was at the Bettola restaurant on Cabrini and 181st. They also started a performance series at Kismat Indian Restaurant, and they've done outreach to all kinds of other venues around the neighborhood, and they've established footholds of performance at many of the night spots and restaurants and bars that have been cropping up in Washington Heights and Inwood over the last several years. And they've been real ambassadors and heroes to music development in our area. And I would say to me personally as well, because several years ago, my music stuff was kind of on the back burner. I have a family, I have a lot of responsibilities. Didn't necessarily have the time or the energy to organize a lot of active music life. And they kind of created a scene around me that I started participating in. I've met a lot of musicians in the neighborhood. One thing that I don't know if people are aware of this, but there just is a very large number of creative people around here. And some of it is just the obvious that the rest of the city has gotten, especially Manhattan, has gotten too expensive for us poor artsy types. And Upper Manhattan is kind of like we're sort of hanging on to the cliffs of of the Palisades by our fingernails. Unfortunately, the last year has been a stumbling block for most of us, but I feel like there's hope in the air right now. I mean, between people like Mark and Louise and your organization and the many creative people around here, I feel like there's a good chance that more venues are going to reopen themselves to performance, and that I hope to see art on the streets and art in the parks and art in the bars and whatever it is. And of course, for now, anybody that wants to should come out on Tuesdays to Bennett Park to watch us all jam, because that's what we've been doing. The Jazz Wahai crew has set up we've got a little portable power station we can plug amps and stuff into. People are coming and sitting in and playing tunes and singing, and sometimes I'll sing some blues or just play some straight ahead jazz, and there's a bunch of really, really good players in the neighborhood. So I would encourage people to come out. Bennett Park, Tuesdays at 4 o'clock.
Well, it sounds, going back downtown, it sounds also like, well, first, I'm glad to hear you sound positive about the possibilities, the prospects of this neighborhood. I agree with you, and I know that's Aaron's mission for sure, and he's well aware of the creative people around here. That's part of the reason why I know you're doing all this. But going back downtown, it sounds like you could write a little history yourself of a scene that used to exist in the village in the 70s and 80s and so forth. I was just wondering, well, your music lesson, your guitar lesson vignette was very interesting. I'm wondering, are there any other episodes or memories you may have of these musicians sort of circling your neighborhood, coming in and out of your life that you may remember from those days?
Sure, a little bit. I don't remember it too well, but so there's on the corner of Bleecker Street and McDougal Street, there is it's now a vacant space. It's been vacant for a very, very long time, but for decades there was a place called the Figaro Cafe there.
Oh yeah.
And most people don't know this, but there are actually 2 incarnations of the Figaro. The first was probably opened sometime in the 50s and until about 68 or 69. And I was kind of born and raised in the Figaro Cafe. Again, because a good friend of my parents, who was a photographer named Richard Kirstel, his day job was managing the Figaro. So we just hung out there and got free hot chocolates all day. And my father was also a fixture there. He had a nickname. He was known as Pete the Prof in the Figaro Cafe. And I have a bunch of pictures of him there and stuff like that. And it's a big part of our life. Anyway, so Richie Havens was a regular there, and Richie Havens was a friend of my dad's from his Figaro days. And so I don't remember this, but apparently Richie Havens was a regular in our house. So that's one thing. Later on, when I was a little bit more aware of the world, there were in the 60s there were peace rallies and demonstrations and stuff all over the neighborhood. So we'd go to Washington Square and hear like Pete Seeger and Arlo Guthrie and people like that. And then later on, when I was in high school and I started playing the blues, I would go out to Washington Square and just hang out with whoever the other, freaks in the park were. And there was, the obvious fixtures. There was a guy named David Peel who was a kind of John Lennon wannabe, who was a fixture there for years. And I jammed with him probably a few times.
Okay.
There was a guy who claimed to be Jimmy Reed.
Well,
And any musicians who were playing in the park, he would come up to you and say, "I'm Jimmy Reed."
like,
And
okay.
he was all decked out in like a pinstripe suit with spats. He sort of had the look of actually more Sonny Boy Williamson than Jimmy Reed. But he'd say, "I'm Jimmy Reed. Let me play that." And he'd sort of babble incoherently. And it took me a while to figure out that Jimmy Reed was actually dead and it wasn't him.
Hey, you got to have a gimmick, right?
Yeah, but you got to have a gimmick.
Yeah. Well, just a very much question based in reality. What are the other two songs you're going to play for us next?
Okay, so the next two tunes I got, one is called "Moonlight in Vermont," which is a classic jazz standard that many guitar players do. It's sort of a classic solo piece. I steal bits and pieces from the most famous version is by a guy named Johnny Smith, and I ain't no Johnny Smith, but I steal a couple of his licks.
Or Jerry Reed, for that matter.
Or Jerry. I'm not Jerry Reed either. And the last song is another original of mine, which is called "I'm Gonna Buy Me a Ticket," and which is another kind of New York City flavored song. It was about just feeling the frustrations of living here. It was written, in the wake of a relationship that ended, and how I just couldn't deal with all of the, every familiar sight just reminded me of what I was not enjoying in my life. But the song has gone through a few incarnations where friends of mine have covered it and that sort of thing, and it sort of takes on. It doesn't have to have my meaning. It has, like a good friend of mine is an expat who lives in Switzerland now, and he's sort of taken it as his song, and it sort of reflects his feelings about why he left the U.S. It doesn't have anything to do with the relationship to him.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
that's it.
Looking forward to it. Here we are again. More music from John Albin.
I'm gonna buy me a ticket and hop the next flight out of town. I'm gonna buy me a ticket and hop the next flight out of town. I can't take living in this city. The whole place just brings me down. I was born and raised here, and every block is burned in my brain. I was born and raised here, and every block is burned in my brain. Now every familiar sight bring me nothing but heartache and pain. Street. That's where I first laid eyes on you. Over there up the street. That's where I first laid eyes on you. Up around the corner, that's when you told me we're all through. Chicago, or head on down to New Orleans. Maybe I'll move to Chicago, or head on down to New Orleans. Just to get myself somewhere, somewhere you'll never be.
Well, John, that was so fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing your music with us today. What can we look forward to from you coming up, and where can we find more of your music on the web?
At the moment, of course, because of for pandemic reasons, there's not a lot scheduled. But I do hope to be restarting my duet performances at both Kismat and at Bettola Italian Restaurant on Amsterdam and 79th Street. they're actually both great restaurants, and I encourage people to check them out, even if there isn't music there. I do not have a website at the moment, but I have a Facebook page for my blues band, which is called, and so if you look up Blue Food Blues Band on Facebook, you'll find a couple of quick videos of us and some of our recordings. I also have a SoundCloud page, which is just my name on SoundCloud. You can, there's a couple playlists of my original music there and recent compositions, and I would suggest that people check that out.
Well, listeners, you'll be able to find some of those links on our episode page for this particular podcast, so we'll get the word out for you.
Great, thank you.
Sure thing. Well, thanks again, John.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I really
you.
appreciate your having me here, and you asked me some great questions that really got me thinking about stuff, and I appreciate that.
Sure thing. Well, it's wonderful having you here on this episode of Live and Local on Inwood Artworks On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now by rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. That really helps. Thanks so much to 809 Restaurant and Lounge here for hosting us in Inwood, and to HeightSites.com, Jean McAdams, big champion of our work, and all of our local uptown support coming from her at Height Sites. Be sure to follow us on social media at Inwood Artworks to keep up with all that we do, including the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Al Fresco, pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. You can support On Air and all of our programming by making a tax-free donation at inwoodartworks.nyc/donate. This program is supported in part by funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, and in part by a grant from the NYC and Company Foundation, with partial support from Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims.
I'm Jonathan Bell.
For Inwood Artworks On Air.